Welcome, David.
Hey, Shrikant. Good to
So
see you.
we're doing this series on a series of interviews on CJ Fearnley's collaborating for comprehensivity project that we are launching. Now, CJ has been at it for a long time before we have launched this project. So now David is based in Philadelphia, and he's been involved in many of CJ's meetups. He knows CJ pretty well. So I really want to hear about CJ and his comprehensivity. So where would you like to start, David?
Well, so you can't describe CJ particularly well if you haven't encountered him. Then it's an exceptional thing because um, he's a very thinking person. So when he comes, for example, to lead something, he comes with extreme preparation, reams of notes, hand incredible pages of small print and documentation. Um, Whatever you're going to discuss, he's like super prepared. Very, so you'd think a little going to be tight and compelled to a format, but very generous in and unassuming in his nature, right? That he has a way of coaxing people out to think about something and open it up to where it goes, so letting it flow with what naturally comes out of people's understanding and let that expand the discussion. So he's like a model of that for us. He's been doing for years. And he's led large groups in Philadelphia in the Ethical Society, a room full of 80, 100 people, whatever. And then we break into little groups and have small discussions, all led by some formalized way of having small discussions on topics, come back together and reunify. And in fact, come to think of it, you play that out in the way you lead the 52 learning ideas. Yeah, that format has worked really well. I've never seen it before, but whatever, it's developed well, and it brings people, even quiet people out. They get a chance to talk in a small group, and then that comes into the whole group. So then this comes around from CJ's having developed that skill and his personality to what it is that the project has become, which is this sort of expression of certain values, which is the abstract thinking and comprehension of things, which is the theoretical, right? All inclusive, expansive thinking, which makes it unlimited. So that's sort of the theoretical goal of the whole project. And that means incorporating unfamiliar cultural ideas, looking at things that are put in dismissive drawers and categories, and saying, wait a minute, why were these relevant? And having a kind of historical view of them, and that pays off in unforeseen ways, right? That's the theoretical, but then there's also a practical side, I'd say, which is by explicit discussion and repeating this kind of thing, examination in groups, it engages you in a way that gives you a commitment to this process. And so the intellectual and social work becomes a communal kind of joining. You become part of the community doing this. And that has the learning and involvement as the two components. You're learning, but you also want to be involved and see, what other people are doing. It's a social and an intellectual thing. So after a while attending, and then eventually it leads you into the hope, the aspiration to do some leadership. So that's like a payoff. It becomes an act, a practical act. And I think that CJ has sort of been the pioneer, in Philadelphia. I'll give examples personally for me. We had meetups when meetups were in person. My first meetups were CJ meetups. That's the case. So he has a math meetup, which is sort of obscure. I don't think any other city had a math meetup. People coming together to look at topics in math. So they're brilliantly chosen, right? And they're innumerable topics. It'd be hard to even go over the range of things, but they're accessible, they're open-ended, and they're inviting. So you have younger people coming in, any age coming. So he's chosen them various ranges of difficulty and interest. So you wouldn't believe the topics we've covered. I could barely imagine what, but I can talk about some of those if you want. For example, he chose a 2-volume set, which we have been working over years, and sections of it at times, by a guy named Polya, who ended up teaching at Princeton, who was studying his didactic techniques, his ways of teaching, and what insights mathematicians have. He's a published mathematician with significant results in certain areas. But he also wrote about the thinking, which is mathematical intuition. And so you don't have to be a mathematician to get into this. The examples are simple enough. We've all seen the Pythagorean theorem, but here are ways of thinking about it. It develops your appreciation for the different insights that lead you on steps and your own thinking and what you resist and how you put things together and when you induce and generalize. So these are the topics that come up as opposed to, being an algebra problem. It's about conceptualization.
Yeah,
And
I love that example because Polya, he's able to, and this is a classic example of what CJ does again and again. He takes some topic like mathematics and he picks things from it which can be scaled up to everybody, which is accessible to everybody and are applicable, like Polya's work on solving problems that is accessible to anybody. Absolutely, that's a great example. What's the I'm loving this because you're bringing so much more context into this. So mathematics is one line. What are the other kinds of meetups that you've seen CJ do? What's the range?
Okay, well, I'll go on to the others. I have 2 other categories, but I do want to finish a little on the math to show you sort of how comprehensive it is, because we've done that. That sounds like a perfect sort of comprehensivist thing. But within just math per se, we did get into the nitty gritties of some things, combinatorics in depth, like a multi-week course. So the idea is you train yourself by week after week. We met once a month, actually, so it lasted for maybe a year. Going over things that are extremely voluminous and then give you a big view of something, which is a whole field. So that is a comprehensivist digging in depth, right? That was beautiful. I never did combinatorics. I did a lot of math in school, but I really stayed away from finite math. And there we were doing this discrete math and generating functions, really important stuff. That served as a background for reading all kinds of other things that are really classic. So then we went on to reading classic things. Shannon on information theory. You hear about it all the time, but there we are reading the original paper, the theoretical basis of his thinking. Beautiful. Not hard math, but we're understanding why he's generalizing what he's doing, appreciating when he wrote it. Looking at Euler, dealing with infinities before there was a discipline of it. The guy is doing amazing. The guy was, you mean amazing, like Descartes, original papers of his on novel constructions of mechanical constructions of numerical solutions to things. Again, his thinking is aligning algebra and geometry, which he's famous for, the Cartesian coordinate system, making geometry into algebra. And here we are looking at his further thinking about how mechanics can solve algebraic problems by becoming physical. Fantastic, right? And I won't go into any detail, but we did so many topics over the years: topology, fractals, proof, the examination of what it is to prove something per se, gestalt thinking, comprehension. So that was just math. Okay, I've only been talking about the math meetup, and that is like CJ and another guy started that, but really CJ was the carrier of that one.
I just want to say one thing here. I just want to say one thing about this. Bucket of macro comprehensive,
right?
Micro incisive is a great example here. You're trying to cover the and a lot of topics in mathematics, but you're going deep, and really trying to drill in, and reading original works. It's my favorite, because what happens is that you see somebody actually grappling with the problem and you can see their mind solving it.
Absolutely.
Instead of somebody coming later on and trying to give you an overview.
It's almost religious. You're looking at their absolute scriptures, the 17th century writings of Euler and Descartes. It's like, really, it's uncorrupt, it's pure thinking. And it's so lovely to read that kind of stuff. Never did that before. And certainly when I went to school, we never look at original works except in the most modern publications, very obscure stuff. This is the basics. It's lovely. And things that are generally skipped in terms of these very issues that are being handled. So that was Math Counts, which CJ did in Philadelphia. He is also, as I mentioned, the Ethical Society. That was a joint thing with what's called the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. I think we have several members of that in your group. Now, interesting there, CJ was one of the 4 principals of that original group in Philadelphia. And the Math and Greater Thinking Society, Philadelphia Thinking Society, these are 10 years of experience that I've had with CJ now. These are like massive efforts. So he'd lead maybe once a month the Thinking Society, and he chose topics you might expect for some of the scientific bent physics topics. So we'd be talking about Newtonian forces and torque and momentum and stuff. Not normally a layperson discussion. And yeah, we'd have people of all walks of life, and certainly scientists in there in the nitty gritty of the conceptualization of these things. And we also did history of science, looking at Islamic science in the Middle Ages. You think there's nothing happening. There's Islamic science developing in this incredible way as the basis of what became, Western thinking too. So appreciating that historical contribution, exactly a microcosm of what you do in comprehensivism, right? You say, what's that other culture doing? Oh, why aren't we thinking about that? Oh, look how it contributes to what we already do, right? So I guess I didn't realize, but in retrospect, I see that already operating in the way the Thinking Society here in Philadelphia works. So that's these sciences. But CJ also led, surprisingly, totally different things in poetry. So examine romantic poetry and interpretation. So looking at the historicity of what this poem is describing in nature and how natural philosophy, is flowing through the poem and the words. And then a little more towards Buckminster Fuller. It's always been a linchpin of CJ's thinking here. We did some Buckminster Fuller rarely, maybe around his birthday, like Darwin's birthday would be a big time for doing some Darwin. But that led us to the design question, the design way, that book, which was also discussed in 52 Living Ideas. So we trundled through that book. And so these are diverse topics, because the design way is a very general view of maybe a process of life, or of creating a project, or of group management, or of architecture. You can see it in so many different ways. And so that book, once again, was sort of unfolded as a multi-petaled rose, right? So that's the second meetup that I became significantly committed to being part of. I led that a couple times with some topics I was interested in. And then there's the 52 Living Ideas, which you guys started together. And now we're specifically into comprehensivity, what a word, applying Buckminster Fuller to structuring our community's growth and self-awareness of how we're growing and what we're intending to do in growing and being a self-contained world, and how we think about everything conceptually. So sort of turning into an informal discipline, that group. It's open-ended, but it's got a certain structure to it, and you're the key to that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, David. So let's look forward to this, to the next year. I'm going to take, we're going to use Buckminster Fuller as the linchpin for this project. We're going to keep coming back to it, but we're going to be focused on comprehensivity. So it's Bucky-inspired comprehensivity. Now, I have always admired your range of thought and how much you have to say about differing things. It's really interesting. So what do you think of this entire comprehensivist project of taking like Bucky as the seed and then building a whole bunch of things. What CJ, when I asked him, he said there are these 4 paths that you can make accessible to people. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but it's very simple. He's saying there are 4 on-ramps to thinking about Bucky's thought. So 4 on-ramps to Bucky's thought. One comes from the design side, which is about engineers and architects, science, math people, not science, engineers and architects. Okay, so that's one. Second path is kind of collaborative comprehensivity. So just being passionate about communicating with each other across multiple disciplines to prepare the ground. So it's like the kind of preparing the community, preparing the camaraderie that you can actually openly share ideas. The third path is that of mathematics, of geometry itself, that Bucky is very big on. And the fourth one he calls integrities, which is kind of holistic way of thinking. So using things like the religious tradition of bringing things together in an integrated way. So there are 4 different ways, he says, you can approach Bucky's thought. And we're planning to go on all 4. So I have 1 week for each of them. And I will have, so that's the plan. What do you think of, this entire project of, do you have, based on what you've done, with CJ through all these years, do you have any thoughts about how we can think about this? What do you expect of it? Any thoughts about this project looking forward?
Well, that's a sort of I've heard the 4 ramps, and I really haven't. There's so many things when we have these meetings, so I haven't parsed that for myself. I don't quite have that framework yet. I'll have to look into those distinctions and see. I'm also not well versed in Buckminster Fuller.
Okay.
So,
Then, let me.
He was like a superstar. Of course, I'm an old guy, right? So,
yeah. Let me rephrase the question then. You are well versed in comprehensivity. So talk about comprehensivity. If we say, look, we want to build collaboration for comprehensivity. What do you think we're doing right here at 52 Living Ideas? What is it that we're doing wrong in order to build up this comprehensivity?
Okay, so I'm going to keep that question in mind. Answer 2 aspects of it. First of all, personally, I want to bring my strengths in. So I've given a talk on music, it's like one of my areas. Another one is like Western philosophy, maybe my religious background. Those are the like 3 areas.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'll fit them into the 4 ramps. I'm sure there are ways. In terms of what's right and wrong, first of all, what's right, because I don't know what's wrong yet. Asking people to bring their strengths in and to do it in a way that matches the open-ended flourishing of the group, right? That'll keep giving energy and stuff, but you don't want it to become diffuse and not. You are sort of giving us, I think, guidance, direction, and keeping us within some bounds. So I think calling on people's strengths and encouraging ways to make meetings that will focus other people and bring them into the conversations with the person who has the energy in that area and develop. And maybe maybe there are ways to format that we need readings that don't take more than so much time, or videos to look at and then bring in discussions. I don't know the ways to formalize that. I mean, what we've done in the Thinking Society was limited size groups. Everyone has to really talk. And here are the issues to reflect on and some optional things to look at. That's one way to do it. See, your structure may be sometimes that, sometimes you must look at this item and we're going to come discuss it like Dante. We're going to talk about chapters 22 to 33 and then boom. And have someone who feels they can facilitate that, even if they're not technically an expert, they're engaged enough. Maybe there's a way to have open-ended discussions of issues that we that are fiery and difficult to discuss, but we can make safe places for that.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So this, I'm really excited about having you contribute, both on kind of music, religious philosophy. So let's work it out. I'm just talking to everybody, trying to line up presentations. We already have some presentations. I'm going to start off with a lot of Bucky related stuff because I want to get the basic language of Bucky in the group. So we are looking at the book Critical Path, which most people, like many people, have said that has been the thing that sold them on Bucky. So the most easy one to that I found was the operating manual. So we're going to do we've already done meetups on that entire book, but we're going to add Critical Path, and we'll go from there. So so that's all I had. Would you like to say anything else about comprehensivity or CJ?
No, we owe, I guess we just know we owe a huge debt to CJ, wishing him the best at this point, and we'll have to make sure we carry on appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. And looking forward to having you on board. Joe, Maritza, and Rupali and me are leading the effort, but you're all, I just want as many people involved as possible. So thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.